This is Building Bridges with Greg Johnson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Building Bridges with Greg Johnson. I'm your host, Greg Johnson, and this is a podcast that is dedicated to helping people with different opinions come together for dialogue and conversation, and to do so in a civil and respectful way. And so we talk about various things on our monthly podcast, and we're excited to be in our third year of operation. We started way back in 2019, and we went through all of the pandemic year of 2020, and here we are in 2021 with new challenges and new opportunities. And so I can't think of a better person to host, to have as our guest on the program as the host than a friend of mine who's been a friend for a good number of years, a fellow pastor. He's a leader in our community. His name is Pastor Corey Hodges. Welcome to our podcast, Corey. Good to have you.
Good to be here, Greg. Yeah.
Awesome. You are a multicultural pastor.
I'm a black pastor with a multicultural church.
There you go.
No,
That's right. For those that are just listening, they would need to know that.
Right.
But we wanted to talk about a number of things that relate to our country today,
Sure.
Both in terms of the question of faith and spirituality, but also kind of a diagnostic on race issues. Not that you are the authority on all race issues across the United States of America, but as an African-American leader in Salt Lake City and connected well with the multicultural movement across America, I think it would be very, very helpful. So we just want to remind our audience that as we begin a new year, we love the fact that you share our podcast, Building Bridges with Greg Johnson, that you feel like it's worthwhile to like and subscribe, and also click the bell for all new notifications. So all those things are helpful. We are now almost near 2,400 subscribers since we started, and we feel really good about that. We want to continue to grow our presence on YouTube and in Spotify and iTunes. So please help us out. If you have enjoyed these podcasts, share them with your friends, and let's continue to bring the spotlight on what God is doing uniquely in Utah through conversation and dialogue, and those principles that we keep talking about through our video blogs that happen each and every Friday, and then our monthly podcast here on Building Bridges with Greg Johnson. So Corey, Pastor Corey Hodges, you have been the pastor of the Point Church for how long?
22 years. It'll be 23 years next month, actually.
Okay, so almost 23 years.
23 years.
And your church had a kind of a significant thing when you changed the name from New Pilgrim Baptist Church, which it had been for how long?
It's the church was founded in 1923, and I arrived in 1998. So up until then, it was New Pilgrim, and then we changed the name around.
So like about
2010.
About 75 years. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's about 75 years. Yeah.
Somebody else is going to check our math on
Yeah,
that. But anyways,
it's close enough.
Yeah, so you say it was founded in 1923 here in Salt Lake City.
Yeah,
and up till 1998 when you came, that was about 75 years.
About 75 years.
Yeah, and so you've been the pastor now for almost 23 years. And at what point did you change the name from New Pilgrim Baptist to the Point Church?
Yeah, so we changed our name in 2010. So
10 years ago.
roughly
Wow.
10 years ago.
And it cocoincided with a location change as well.
Yeah, we were located on 6200 South in Utah, in Taylorsville, Utah, which is a busy intersection here in Utah, and we moved to Kerns, and so when we moved to Kerns, we also changed the name shortly after.
Yeah.
So in 2010, we changed the name to the Point Church.
Yeah.
And we did it because we thought that New Pilgrim Baptist just sounds, it kind of denotes an African American church. There are not many white churches. New Pilgrim Baptist Church. So, and we were intentionally moving toward a multicultural congregation, and we thought the Point Church would be a little more welcoming, or not, maybe not welcoming. It's not the right word. A little more not so stigmatized in terms of
dated
or sound so ethnic.
Yeah.
New Pilgrim brought some great things, and then we changed to the Point. It was just a continuation of those things.
And we want to have a conversation with you on the value of a multicultural faith community expression, but even in a larger context, how a community like Utah can be better focused on the multicultural task in a world where we have just gone through a huge year of racial tension. And let's start there. Let's start the conversation again. Back in May in Minneapolis, certainly we know that there was a horrendous ordeal, a murder of George Floyd on the streets of Minneapolis at the knee of a police officer that extended unnecessary and barbaric measures, which led to his death and his suffocation. There was an outcry across America. There was violence. There was protesting. There was looting, if you will, tearing down businesses and things, and lots of things. It even came to Salt Lake City, Utah, where we had our own particular tough time. As you look back over the year of 2020, and now here we are in the first week of 2021, is there any clear takeaway from what happened in May of 2020 and the history, the course of action that has been following? Are we better? Are we not better? Is there any commentary that you would have on the state of race in America right now?
Yeah, as I think about the state of race in America right now, I mean, those events certainly were, events of a lifetime, I would say. I mean, you think about the Bloody Sunday, you think about the MLK shooting and other big events in American history as it relates to race. I think the George Floyd video will probably be up there. It's something that we will all remember because it was such a tragic video to watch. I think that created some much needed conversation. The national dialogue that we had in those, last year, in those months after that video, I think it was needed, and I think they've been very helpful. I mean, I did a lot of speaking here in Utah. I did a talk with Senator Scott from South Carolina. I was on a panel where we talked about race relations in America. So I think one of the positives, if we have to think about something that was positive that came out of the George Floyd incident, was that it made America talk about the issue of race and relations. Is it better? Is it the same? Is it worse? I mean, it's hard for me to make that call. I do think the politics in our time kind of brought some of those feelings to the surface, and the polarization that our politics causes sometimes, particularly in the last presidency and the one before, Obama and Trump. For different reasons, brought some of the race conversations to the surface, and the George Floyd thing just was an event that brought those conversations forward, and I think that was good because we had to talk about what we were looking at on that video.
It wasn't theory.
Crucial conversations.
It was absolutely tangible. It was on video. It was seen millions of times. It angered, it hurt, it frustrated. It showed an element of racial tension that still exists. It is, and certainly you have these conversations that go back and forth between the percentage of police brutality against African Americans, against Anglos, against Hispanics. There's all kinds of conversations about statistics and things like that, but there is nothing that can speak more powerfully than the tangible, visual reality of hate between one race and another man's race, or one man's race and another man's race.
And that video, I think, the other good thing about it, the other good thing about the horrible event, is that most people that saw the video, the overwhelming majority of Americans who saw the video, could agree.
Yes.
That this is something that was
this
not
was wrong.
good. This was
bad.
Wrong. And I think that is not emphasized enough.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of division and there's a lot of polarization, but I think there's something to at least acknowledge and celebrate that most Americans saw the George Floyd video and they were not happy with what they were looking at.
Yeah.
And I think
it was,
in terms of progress,
broadly condemned.
Yes, that's by policemen, by black organizations, white organizations, and you name it. So I think that's a positive that we don't point out a lot because it wasn't something that we were so divided on. We saw that Most Americans saw that and said, "Hey, this is not good."
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that's very interesting that you speak to the value of the conversation itself that has been happening. It has brought different faces to the table for sure, both from maybe more of a progressive perspective, more liberal perspective, politically speaking, or more conservative or whatever. But it's brought the faith community in. It is, as an African American leader, and you both, we both know John Jenkins, Pastor John Jenkins out of Maryland, and he and I had a podcast right after those events, middle of the year. The reality of America's first African American president with Barack Obama, followed by one that got identified, President Donald Trump, as racially, how would you say that? That he was a racist president. That people perceived him to be racist, and he kept denying that.
Right.
And some of the benefits of a Trump presidency in African American life and culture in America was higher job rates, higher job employment. I don't know if everybody agrees on all the statistics, but there was. Our economy grew, and it affected Hispanics, blacks, whites, women, men. And it was generally speaking a positive economic turn for the country pre the pandemic. So it's interesting that no matter how we try to get our arms around racial tension, particularly the white-black racial history of this country. Is it ever going away, or will it always be a matter of concern that we simply gotta keep working at? What do you think?
I think it will. As long as we're human, we're gonna deal with that. It's our sin nature. I don't know if we can ever eradicate racism or any of the isms that we struggle with as a country. I think we can learn how to be better human beings and be civil in our dialogue about it. We can recognize progress, as we recognize the inequity in some of the charged events. I don't think it's ever going away. I just think we got to be better humans about it, talk about it, try to solve those issues. But it's not going to be eradicated as long as human beings are part of our existence.
Yeah, we would say that there is a human problem, a human condition of which we call that sin. We say that people sin and fall short and mess up and do bad things, and that's why we have prisons, and that's why we have police officers and courts of law. Again, I know there are larger questions than probably we have time to respond to in the systemic nature of racism in this country, whether it's systemic or whether it's incidental, whether or not it's this big or that big. But I will say, and I will say this for our audience sake, one of the richest things that we could share with you as an audience, listening to this podcast, listening or watching to this podcast, is that you need to inventory your life and ask yourself, do I have somebody outside of my own race that I am building a friendship with, building a relationship? If you are a white person, do you have an Asian friend, a Hispanic friend, a black friend? Are you building some dialogue with someone outside of your ethnicity?
That's right.
Because you can be a better person for that. You will be a better person. And the more that you can be eclectic, which is so hard in Utah because it's such a white state. We know the demographics of our state.
Right.
But Corey, speak to that issue of building relationships. Would you challenge an African American person to do the same? Would you challenge a white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever? Is that the kind of thing that would help us be a better human?
Yeah, this is probably our greatest weapon in the struggle for community, is that we have to take that advice, find friendships, create friendships intentionally outside of our cultural, our own culture. Because in that way, you don't have to agree on everything, but you can find a space to talk. Find a space to share ideas, perspective, right? And here, I love the idea of sharing stories, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We all have a story.
Yeah.
You and I are great friends, and we've been for over a decade.
Yeah.
And we've come from different backgrounds. I mean, you're white, I'm black, but we have an opportunity to share our stories.
Yes.
And sharing our stories help us to empathize. Because see, empathy is very important in our dialogue as well. I cannot empathize with Greg Johnson if I don't know his life story.
Right, that's a big
Greg
key.
can't empathize with me as an African American if he doesn't know my story.
Right.
I know we were talking one time. I remember sharing with a group of pastors. You asked me to share about being stopped by the police.
Yeah.
You know, and I shared that story in a standing together meeting about how I was driving down the highway here in Utah, pastor of one of the larger churches here, and the policeman was behind me and turned his lights on. I wasn't speeding, and I was telling the guys how I was overcome with fear.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of them appreciated that story.
Yes, they
right?
did. Yes, they
because
did.
it gave them a perspective. Like, are you kidding me? Like, really? Why were you scared? And what were you feeling? And so we had an opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah.
And now, when they hear stories like that, whether it's on the news or the other friends that may have experienced that, they can relate. They can try to have some empathy. And so I think when we kind of bunker down in our own little, clans and camps, we don't have the opportunity to share our stories with each other.
We do a disservice to one another
Yeah.
and to the value and the richness of multiculturalism itself, where we can learn about another culture, we can learn about aspects of dialect that change, or dietary issues, or special kinds of foods, or just fun things about each other's culture. And when we come into relationship and we learn to enjoy that relationship that is different than our own comfortable, normal kind of relationships with our own kind, there's a little bit of a challenge there. There's a little bit of a growth curve. But the reward and the payoff is humongous. And you are a testimony of that. I'm a testimony of that.
That's right.
We have other relationships as well, where I know that when we do it, we don't feel bad about it. We feel thrilled that we had the chance, and we have the chance to maintain these relationships.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of intentionality.
Yes.
Right? Our natural instinct is not to, I'm going to be with people and create a relationship with people that are not like me. Our natural instincts are, hey, let me find people that have things in common with me.
Yeah.
And so you have to be intentional. The other thing I would add too, Greg, is building relationships outside of your culture is not always about agreeing. Like, I'm not trying to get you to agree with my perspective
Good point.
or to agree with my experience. I just want you to understand it.
Yes.
And have a different perspective. And we can disagree on a perspective and still walk away and be friends. But what happens is we're better human beings. After that exchange, we don't have to agree on everything. I think sometimes people, when we talk about race relations or anything like that, it's almost this assumption: I gotta get Greg to agree with me, Greg has to get Corey to agree with me, or to come down on my side. No, it's about sharing those perspectives, not about agreeing on them, but just sharing them and understanding. Because I can disagree with Greg and also be empathetic.
Yeah, that is a huge principle on the Building Bridges with Greg Johnson podcast. And we speak about that regularly, with the idea that relationship does not always mean agreement, and that's okay. That you can disagree with your liberal friend if you're a conservative, or your conservative friend if you're a liberal. If you're from one culture or another ethnicity, you can disagree with or not fully appreciate or understand or like all the things that one culture likes versus another. But again, we live in a world that is filled with all kinds of beautiful expressions of God's creation, all kinds of humanity, we have two genders, we have multiple races, we have multiple cultures, and we can get along and learn and become better people. There is a principle that we call, the Bible calls the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The idea that you would want to treat someone like you would want to be treated. Dignity, respect, kindness, mercy, grace, love are those qualities. So, Corey, we've talked a lot about that, but I'm going to move it into this arena of multiculturalism itself. Help me understand what that is, and why you are pastoring a church that is defined by that term. What is multiculturalism?
I think multiculturalism, let me just say what it's not.
Yeah.
It is not a black pastor with an all-white congregation. It's not a white pastor with an all-black congregation. It's not a congregation that has, a black senior pastor and maybe one white guy on staff and two families that are white, or vice versa. I think there's a threshold that a church has to cross in its membership and in its leadership to be considered a multicultural church. That's just my own personal definition of multicultural. Only reason why I make the distinction is a lot of people want to claim multiculturalism or like they have a multicultural church because they have maybe, it's an all-black worship team with one white on, or all-white worship team with one black on. But the church is a majority, 80-90% white or 80-90% black. To me, that's not a multicultural church.
Yeah.
I think that threshold has to be a little higher in the leadership, which is important, and in the membership. So for me...
So it is a congregation of mixed cultures, multi-cultures, many cultures.
Many cultures.
Yeah. And how does that look at the Point Church?
Yeah. So we're about 51% African American. Now that's the majority.
Yeah.
But we have a very, like a 23%. I forget the exact numbers. There's an article in Outreach magazine that kind of gives the numbers from our demographics. About 20% all white families, and then we have another good portion of Hispanics, Polynesian. We have 33, and we just added a new family Sunday who's going to be on our staff. Gives us 34. Because he's from Canada, family of Canadians.
Yes.
Gives us 34 different nationalities that we consider, a part of the Point Church family.
Yeah.
This is Africans, and because there's a distinction between African and African Americans. A lot of people kind of lump them all together. So for me, multiculturalism is not just about, a black church with a few whites or a white church, with a few blacks. It's about a legitimate number of diverse
And
cultures.
I think what you just said there, maybe people take that for granted, but the idea that if you're from Kenya or you're from the Sudan or you're from Nigeria or you're from South Africa or you're from some other part of the world, just because you're of a darker skin or of the black culture doesn't mean that you are in full fellowship or understand all the cultures of every other black community.
Right.
There's a lot of tension between various black cultures, African cultures that war amongst each other. And so there again, that's that human condition. Yeah. But it's a beautiful thing when we see it. And the Point Church is a beautiful expression of people coming together from different backgrounds, worshiping God together, serving their community together, teaching their children together, helping their children develop values together. Right. And working through all the challenges and difficulties of that.
Right.
What do you think are a few
I knew
of the
that
challenges?
was coming. I kind of heard that.
Few of the blessings. Let's start with some challenges.
Some of the challenges is knowing when to speak up on current events that can be polarizing. For instance, like the George Floyd. Those are easy. The George Floyd was easy. We made a statement as a church. This is bad. When the cops were being killed in Texas, just targeted because they were cops, we spoke up on that because we felt like, hey, that's a universal wrong. I don't care what the reason is. So sometimes it's a challenge not weighing in on every lightning rod issue, and sometimes there's an expectation in the multicultural church. Hey, we want you to lean to one side or the other. We're politically diverse. We have Democrats and Republicans, conservative and liberals in our church. And this makes for while it's a beautiful smorgasbord of ideas and concepts and thought, it can be contentious sometimes.
Yeah.
But we intentionally create conversations and we create spaces within our community, our church community, where we can have those conversations that are tough. Yeah. But here's what we say, and here's how we try to promote those sort of conversations. We say, at least those people are in a community where those conversations are safe to have, as opposed to at a church that's all white or all black. Let's just say if we went to all black church and you're talking about a social issue, everybody would have the same perspective, theoretically, ideally, not necessarily, but ideally. Yeah. So there would be no pushback. There would be no other perspective. There would be no other thought. Or if you're at an all white congregation and let's say a policeman was shot or whatever, that's one perspective, about
that
the feeling
group
of
think will take
that
place.
Group think would take place. But when you're in a multicultural church, you're going to get pushed back on both sides, which creates conversation. Yeah. And maybe not necessarily agreement, but you say at the end of the day, man, at least I'm intentionally in an environment where I'm forced to listen to different perspectives. And I think we grow, and that's what we promote at our church, at the Point Church. And we've had to be a part of those conversations and lead those conversations so that they are fruitful and healthy.
Yeah,
At the same time.
Well,
So that's been some of the
that's
challenges.
excellent. What are some of the blessings then? What because
I guess I kind of named both of them.
Okay.
Yeah. The blessings is the talent.
Yeah.
The cultural talent, the cultural awareness,
the diversity.
the diversity. The other thing is, just like blacks and Hispanics, they're not monolithic. So to meet one black dude is not to know all black dudes. Like all black guys aren't, black people aren't liberal. You have some conservative. Same thing with Hispanics. If you meet a Puerto Rican, that's not the same as a Mexican.
Right.
And those are things that you learn because you're in the community where those conversations come up. I will never forget and I don't want to take too much time. One of my first Sunday at when we were doing this multicultural thing, we had a Thanksgiving service. Yeah, and I was like, man, it's going to be great. So I was announcing that we were going to have a Thanksgiving service. So we had the service, and after the service, a Native American lady came up to me and said, Pastor, I came here because I support what you're doing, but I want you to know for the future, for a Native American, Thanksgiving is not a day of celebration.
Oh, wow.
Never thought about it. It makes sense. Now that I mention it, it makes sense. But these are the sorts of benefits you'll get when you're in a multicultural community.
Now,
and she educated me as to why.
And it's interesting because even in that situation, we at least hear of the first Thanksgiving that it did involve the Native Americans, and I don't know enough about that topic as related to what your friend commented with you on. But how do you deal with the fact that one African American's point of view, or one Native American's point of view, or one Hispanic point of view, or Asian, or Anglo, or whatever, sometimes they may feel like because I am the white person, I am the black person, I am the brown person, I'm the yellow person, whatever, I have a right to speak for everybody. How do you make sure that one person is not kind of hijacking the emotion in the room or hijacking the agenda if they're really not representative of everybody? How do you find majority consensus?
What we try to do is approach it with the idea of sacrifice.
Yeah,
like
that's
everyone
good.
has to give something, give
That's
up
good.
something.
That's good.
So if I'm black and I love gospel music, and that's what I prefer, I have to sacrifice. Maybe not every week we're gonna sing gospel music. If I'm Anglo, I may have to give her the fact that it may not be Chris Tomlin. It may be James Cleveland.
Who's a contemporary Christian
Christian CCM,
white guy.
white guy. But if I'm going to be a part of the Point Church, I have to sacrifice that. Maybe every Sunday it may not be Chris Tomlin. We may get a James Cleveland Sunday, who's an African American gospel singer. Yeah. So we try to approach it and try to encourage our partners, members, and friends of our church that bring their families there. That it's about equal sacrifice, but we're going to all get equal benefit.
Yeah, right.
So you don't go into it with an approach, I'm coming to the point to get something from me.
Yeah.
I'm coming to the point to give something of myself.
Yeah.
Good. And to sacrifice
Oh,
in some way.
that's, again, for our kids who might be in public schools or other kinds of school areas where there's kind of that built-in diversity that exists there, to engage that with fellow students and fellow, whatever your area of influence is, or whether it's sports or theater or drama or music or whatever, you have that opportunity. And it's very easy to move back out of our time of education into communities that are just more representative of ourselves. And I love the fact that the Point Church is a shining example. I would invite people to consider visiting the Point Church, if nothing more than for an expression, to understand an expression of multiculturalism and to learn about it and to see it firsthand. It's a wonderful thing to bring your children to be a part of that. And again, there's so few opportunities a lot of times in Utah for that kind of experience. So for anybody checking it out, the Kerns Church the Point Church in Kerns, Kerns, Utah, would be a great time. You have Sunday services each Sunday, online, obviously.
Online and in person. Yeah.
What is your time periods?
9 a.m. service and 11:15 service, and we have a Spanish service in between. So,
let me. We have about 5 minutes here, Pastor Corey. But I want to ask you because I think there's a certain level, of fatigue out there, certainly with the pandemic. Emotional fatigue, psychological fatigue. We have been told, you and I have been told by certain authorities that social statistics on mental health things are high. We know that we do have a pandemic a vaccine. A lot less people have been immunized so far than what they wanted goal-wise. We're going into a new year. There are some concerns about the virus spiking and, holiday spiking and also new strands of it. What is a word of encouragement for anyone? I know this is a little off topic, but I don't want to just leave without giving you a chance to speak into anybody's heart who might be listening and just say, I need to hear a word of encouragement on how to get through to the other side as this thing maybe seems to be lingering beyond. We're all looking for the day of normalization, going back to when it was like before, and we don't know when that's going to happen. It could be this spring, could be this summer, who knows? I don't know. You don't know, I don't know.
Right.
So what are some of the ways in which you encourage somebody in your church or just someone that you might have a conversation with about how to hold on? Because this is real.
Yeah, I would just say you have to trust God. I mean, we've all been hit with this uncertainty, pastors included, and you have to just really trust God that He is in control. I know that sounds generic and basic, but it's fundamentally true. It's the only thing that I found that has worked for me. Trying to do ministry and do worship and church, plan church and ministry during COVID. All the answers are not there sometimes. None of us went to seminary and learned how to pastor through a pandemic, and so we should have been trusting God all before, but we definitely need to lean in and trust God all the more in the crises, in this uncertainty, and just know that God has it under control. The other thing I would say is try to figure out what are the blessings of this time, and stop focusing on what the restrictions and the inconveniences and the uncertainties. Ask yourself, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus Christ, what is it that I can gain from this experience? What are the positives that I can take from this experience?
Or would you also say not only that, because I know your church has been at the forefront of some of this, along with other key churches in our valley here at Life Church, Calvary Chapel, Salt Lake City, and a number of other churches have been really reaching out to serve the community, provide food boxes, provide resources. I know the Adventure Church down in Draper. There's a number of churches that are serving the community, so that's one of the benefits that you can get out of a pandemic is how can you think more of others than of yourself?
Absolutely.
And by doing that, relationally, and again, it's remarkable because frankly, this is hard. You don't oftentimes know how to do it. You know, hey, are you a hurting person? Can I help you?
Right.
Well, that's awkward.
Nobody wants to admit it sometimes.
But maybe you can talk to your friend and say, how are you doing with this? Are you unraveling? I'm unraveling. Vulnerability, honesty opens up doors of conversation too. And that's a big, powerful principle on this program again, that when you're vulnerable, another person will be vulnerable. When you're honest, another person will be invited to that honesty. Yeah. And I think that we have to invite people into conversations. As we were just talking about in race and culture, we have to invite people into conversations about mental health. How are you feeling? Are you down? And not just a simple, hey, I'll pray for you, but really kind of following up. And I know what I'm talking about right now in relationship to the challenges of life. Life is hard. We just can't minimize that, and we can't minimize it in a pandemic. So we're not trying to be simplistic here to any of our listeners. It's not a simplistic answer.
No, it's not.
It's just a reality that one day this will be over.
Absolutely.
We've got to get through it day by day, week by week, month by month, hopefully not year by year, but hopefully month by month until this herd immunity has established. And we can now begin to live a little bit more normal. So I don't know if you have any final comments on that.
And we do it together.
Yes.
And my final comment is, Greg, I just want to thank you for the part you play, standing together, and the podcast, the bridges that you're building. It's all part of that solution that we're just talking about, is the relationships and partnerships in the community. And I just want to thank you.
Sure.
As a local pastor in Utah, you make a difference in this community. I just want to thank you for that, and I'm honored to be in partnership.
Well, that's mutual. Our feelings, we We are an African American and a Caucasian American on a podcast together, talking about race, culture, and mental health. But what people don't see is behind the camera, there's a Chilean guy that's directing this. I don't call him a Hispanic. He's a Chilean. He's from the country of Chile.
Okay.
He reminds me of that.
I didn't know that, but now I know.
Yeah, it's very cold there in Chile. You get chilly there sometimes. See, I'm being silly. But the point is that even in this room, there is the beauty of God's diverse creation. A man from Florida, from the African American community, a man born in Southern California, from the white community, our friend from Chile, bringing his insights and his perspective also. So we're not just talking about this, folks. We're doing it.
That's right.
We're not just saying it's a good idea. We're living it. And you know what? I will tell you, there are times that my friend Corey and I have gotten a little bit cross-haired with each other for a little cultural issues. I know certainly Marco and I have gotten crosshairs with one another. And sometimes it's my fault. Sometimes it's their fault. Most times it's their fault. But what we do is we work through it. We don't give up, you know. Right. And can I wrap up with this little thought here? You know, Corey and I had a little misunderstanding one time, and I kind of felt like it was time to just let the relationship kind of go for a little while. And you know, I didn't know what I just felt like maybe you didn't care as much as I was hoping you would care about our friendship. And so I let a week turn into a couple weeks, and a couple weeks into a month, and a month into a couple more months, and you didn't show up to some of our pastors' meeting, and I felt like, who does he think he is, and so I was getting more and more frustrated, and there was some misunderstanding, and finally we met. Did you call me or did I call you?
I don't remember.
Somehow we met. We were intentional because we knew
we went to Zaxby's.
Yes, we had some chicken.
Yeah, a good old fellowship. Good, yeah.
And so somehow we realized we're letting too much time build up a resentment or an attitude.
And we're better together than apart.
And we're better together. So we did it, and we kind of shook hands, and we got back on the right page. And it was so funny when your beautiful wife, Benita, to wrap up this story, she shared something with you. You tell it.
Oh, she was like, when she heard that you and I were having lunch, she said, "Oh, good. I'm glad you guys are friends again."
Yeah, like she knew that we had kind of gotten a little distanced between us, and she also I laugh at that. It's a fun I'm glad you guys are friends again. Well, we never thought we weren't friends.
Yeah, we just
but. Our actions were kind of letting some grass grow in between us. Yeah. And that happens. It happens between all kinds of people, husbands and wives even, children, parents, friends, and you let that grass grow up and it gets in between you, and you let a little bit of time become a little bit more time, and all of a sudden it's like too much effort, too hard, too awkward, too weird. So we're just going to let it go.
Right.
And I know that people have to have boundaries. I know that people have to decide. I can't be everybody's best friend. I can't be friends with the whole wide world. But I'm telling you, we all need to make a priority in 2021 to build relationships with people that don't look like us or act like us or come from the same places that we come from. We're going to be better for it. We'll be better human beings. We'll learn. We'll grow. It will be enhanced.
Yep.
Yeah.
All that good stuff.
Last word to you.
Last word. I have any last word. It was just good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. We want to thank you for joining us for another edition here in January of 2021. Can't believe we're saying that. This program is committed to building dialogue between people with different opinions and helping them to learn that through dialogue and conversation and respect and civility, we can become better people. And so again, like, share, and certainly subscribe if you can to this program. This is an important conversation we continue to keep having. We'll see you next month on Building Bridges with Greg Johnson.